played already. The PvP in Final Fantasy XIV, and I think a lot of people are kind of like that. It's not the best out there, in my opinion. And I think that's kind of like what a lot of people say about it as well. I don't know what I would bring in to change it. And I think that's something that we kind of touched on in the last discussion about other games. Like, why would you play an MMO for PvP if you could play a specific just PvP game that's going to do it a lot better, right? It's a really hard thing to have a great PvP system in a game that does all these other systems as well, when they have to balance for different things.
Chris can totally be like, Brian, let the guest speak. Hey everybody, welcome to the Casually Hardcore Podcast, episode 42. My name is Brian, and today we have a very happy guest, or very welcome to welcome our guest, TinyBlueGames, here with us on the program. Talk about Final Fantasy XIV, ArcheAge, Unchained, more. Saw you played some WoW Classic. You go by Seesaw, you go by Chris, you go by TinyBlueGames. So either way, we're probably going to refer to him and each of those names at some point on this podcast. If you guys have not heard of TBG, he's a content creator who plays MMORPGs, makes videos about his experiences with these games over on YouTube. Link will be in the description below, so you can go check out his channel, give him a follow, and see what he's got coming up. Now, this is a conversational podcast, and while I suspect that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Final Fantasy XIV and the upcoming patch 5.1, especially getting your perspective as a new player, Chris, I would be remiss if we didn't touch on what's been going on with Activision Blizzard as of late. It is a hot button topic, and yet another hashtag movement has started with hashtag Boycott Blizzard. I, however, do not want us to spend the whole show on this, so if you're listening or you're watching the podcast later, note that we're going to just kind of front load that for a little bit, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about ideally something fun, something, you know, that we all love, and etc. So if at all possible, I'll try to include a timestamp on the video for you guys to go and jump if you have no interest in our thoughts on all the current happenings that is going on this week. Chris and I are actually going to be out BlizzCon here in a couple of weeks ourselves.
Assuming there is one.
Assuming there is one. Ultimately, it's good. Well,
we'll be in Irvine, California.
We'll be hanging out.
That part's handled.
Yeah, I got my Winnie the Pooh shirt ready to rock and roll. But anyway, so this is hopefully going to be a fun podcast. I do want to say, Chris, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come join us. Why don't you introduce yourself for those who might not have heard of you? What kind of games have you played? What got you started in YouTube and all that?
Sure, yeah. So thank you very much for having me on the show. It's really exciting. I will state this is the first time I've ever done anything live, so kind of very conscious of that and a little terrified, but well, it'd be good. I've been assured that they can take things out after the fact, but you guys get to hear the raw,
we haven't had to do too much of it. Typically we have really awesome, like, our guests have been
well, good. So there's a high bar is what you're saying.
I love Skill Up, but oh my god, I had to put a disclaimer. I was like, yeah, I tried to edit the podcast to kind of, no, it just didn't make
one of my notes said there's 7 between these 30-second intervals.
Anyway, sorry, continue.
No, it's all good. So I've been doing YouTube for actually a really long time with a very small channel. And it's still, in like relative terms, very small. Like you guys are, 10 times bigger. So and then there's people that are bigger. But it's super exciting to...
We're still chasing PewDiePie. It's like great.
Whenever you get some sort of following that attaches to, a recent game that you're playing or something like that. Because I've gone through many different games. I started with Guild Wars 2 as the primary one that I did video creation for. I then went through the whole life and death cycle of WildStar. And then finally, I've recently tried Final Fantasy XIV. And I've gotten a lot of attention for that, specifically with the expansion release. That's always a really good time to start a new game. And it just, whenever you have people that are excited to see you playing, you really get attached to that community and want to make more content for them. So that's really where I've focused a lot of my attention recently. but I do play a ton of other games, and I know my viewers sometimes don't love that I'm like, why are you still only this level? I'm like, I play all these different games.
How many different games? Like, how many would you quantify? Like that you're actively trying to work on?
That I'm actively trying. Well, specifically, I guess WoW, Final Fantasy XIV, Guild Wars 2. Those probably take like the most amount of my time, but I do play like non-MMOs as well. Like Fortnite, I've played a fair bit with my friends, League of Legends, like a bit more competitive PvP sort of side of things. What else? Maybe that might be it. So maybe it's not that many games. I don't know. I just feel like I split my time among things.
Even with like Fortnite, even with those games, like they are games that you can just sink a whole evening into, and not even realize it. We've been playing a little Destiny. And I've been playing that just like it's any chance I can get, and it's like, it's time to go to bed. It's like how many matches can I get in before that? And it's just been incredible. Now, if you guys good.
Oh no, yeah, I was just gonna, you mix that with like work and like all the other stuff in life. It's just the time goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, so guys, you can check out this podcast Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud. Anywhere podcasts are, I guess, distributed. If you do enjoy the audio version of this podcast, please leave us a review, leave us a like, share it with your friends. It really helps us out. And we thank you guys for listening, either or watching on the video form or audio. Regardless, links will all be in the description below, both for Tiny Blue, for our podcast series, and more. Now, if you missed our last show, we had DM21 Gaming talking about Atlas, Final Fantasy XIV, Mixer versus Twitch. It was really quite a fascinating and just epic show all around. And we do want to thank our partnership with Exit Lag, who helps support the channel. We have a link in below if you're having any kind of lag issues, especially with Final Fantasy XIV. It works great. In fact, people who've had issues playing Ninja in certain countries have messaged us to thank us that, hey, like, thank you for letting me know about this. But we do have a link and a code for 20% off Do Work. If you guys want to check them out, you get 3 free days, 20% off, and help support the channel. And if it helps your game overall improve, that's a plus. But again, if it doesn't, then no pressure. Don't worry about it. So with the business concluded, I'm going to turn to this Chris. We've been collecting Chris's. There have been a couple of podcasts.
We've had some Brian's too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's a theme here. I'm going to turn to this Chris because Chris and I have had a lot of conversations this week, and we all, I think there's a legal argument, a moral argument. There's definitely a lot of drama, and I tweeted out because I told this to Chris. I was like, it's coming up on a year since everybody's been mad at Blizzard, but for all different reasons. It's like, it seems like every time it dies down, something else happens.
People have been off and on upset with Blizzard for years, but from last November to this November has just been a constant state of like recovering or preparing for the next issue. For those of you that aren't aware of Blizzard's shenanigans because you don't watch mainstream news or gaming news at this point, Blizzard took back the winnings and put a ban on the player and the casters around a Hearthstone tournament. The winner made a statement to support Hong Kong in their protest against mainland China. The reason the casters were banned was because the casters knew he was going to do it, and at the end of the interview, from what I found from translations, basically said, okay, say your piece now, and then they kind of like ducked down and laughed like, we know this is bad, and then, so like, that's why they got hit. It being against the rules makes sense that a gaming company doesn't want to be a mouthpiece for just any political issue and set that trend, but the level of the punishment does seem to be a little more severe. Taking away the entire amount of winnings, a whole year ban, it does feel like a pretty stiff slap. So I would say that likely that's because they want to be in the Chinese market. It's one of the, it is estimated that in the next 5 years, there will be more active gamers in China than the entire population of the United States.
Well, it's 500 million already. That's
active
fact.
Blizzard players.
Actively.
Yeah. Diablo Immortal. Call of Duty has a mobile game out over there right now. Yeah. And you put out a piece, and then you texted me as you were making yours so that I could start working on mine.
Yeah.
I watched Brian's. I watched a bunch of other creators. I spent all night reading about the stuff going on with the NBA because they're in hot water for basically the same thing. And I I spent all night looking at like, well, what other gaming companies cater to it? Because most gaming companies, Final Fantasy, Guild Wars, EVE Online, they run dedicated servers in China.
Special formatted with like content removed and
patch. There are multiple patches behind because they have to usually go through a Chinese publisher. So like that statement that was made by Blizzard that sounded like that said our country. First of all, it's a highly contextual language, so take translations with a grain of salt. Second of all, we have to learn that in the 14 community because our translations are always that's not what they meant. So and in addition to that, it was the Chinese publisher that made that statement. So usually there's a Chinese publisher they have to work through, and so I made a 45-minute video going over what could Blizzard have done, why I think what they did was within the norms of what any major corporation would have done, whether or not I agree with it morally, what I think they should have done morally, what I think that they should have done kind of just from a business standpoint, all of this. And then I told Brian I was about to hit publish, and then
everybody started quitting.
Casters started quitting. There was a rumor that they were stopping people from deleting their accounts. That was actually just that the account services section, they had so many people quitting that just failed, so it went down for an hour for some people. So they weren't trying to stop you from quitting, there were just too many people quitting, and it literally crashed that. And and so then I called Brian. I was like, I have a 45-minute video that's totally wrong now. Like there's even more context. Like what a mess. And this is all 3 weeks before BlizzCon, which I think their plan was, let's just make a minor statement, keep our mouth shut, and in 3 weeks we'll announce Diablo 4, we'll announce Overwatch 2, we'll announce 9.0 for WoW, and everybody will forget all about this. And then they didn't. So I think BlizzCon will be affected now. So that's kind of where
people from who are the MCs at BlizzCon have resigned. There have been multiple walkouts going on at Blizzard right now. And ultimately, again, like, if this was 6 months, I don't think BlizzCon would be affected, but like people were tweeting out from their Instagrams and more like their Winnie the Pooh cosplay, their mass cosplay. A lot of people coming out in support of this. Ultimately, Blizzard's own policy, what I was telling Chris, in my opinion, their policy in order to try to prevent this kind of thing is what sparked this kind of thing. So them trying to Streisand affect it is really why more people are interested and aware of what's going on in Hong Kong. Like I told Chris, I said in my video, I'm like, I'm not an expert. Like, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. I don't know about the geopolitical leanings one way or the other. I know how I feel and where I personally stand, but that's also could be easily impacted by, like the information that I've received, right? So I'm not going to sit here and come out and be like, this is the way it is and et cetera, because I still feel like I need to absorb another 1,000 years of history that I'm maybe not aware of. It's like just before I sit here and start pretending.
At least 60 or 70.
At least 70, right?
Because they just celebrated their 70th.
Did you see the John Oliver thing?
Yes. If you don't have enough pandas. So on that note, Chris, like, as a content creator, it's really easy to want to just focus on just games. Like, as important as there are issues, there are a lot of important issues. Like here in the US, there's always stuff going on in healthcare or gun reform or education or
taxes. Everything.
Politics. There is always something, and it does affect people's lives, much less things like this where you have literally things that from some point of views looks like human rights violations, and like there's a whole global stage. But like, how does that affect you as a content creator when you just want to talk about video games?
It's hard, yeah, because you say, could have a entire video about something, and then all of a sudden the entire world's view of the game or something like that changes, and it's like no one's going to care about my video now, or my video is incorrect or something like that. So it's really...
And it could be that your video is correct, but it goes against essentially what people are feeling. Because it's one of the things Chris said is like, people are going to hate this video because they're going to feel like I am pro-China. And it's like, I was like, well, you need to make sure you state that in the first 10 seconds. They'll still think that, but you need to say, like, if you're just going to look at the legal argument, if you're just going to look at the... it's not about, like, I have to fire somebody. It's about the fiduciary responsibility to the, the shareholders and potentially, like, going to jail because you're telling your shareholders, hey, we're going to have this opportunity for, like, $1.5 billion in revenue this year, et cetera, et cetera. And we said, and then for no reason, no business reason, we said, nope, okay, we're going to do this. But it's a very complex and hot button issue, and that's where it's at. I think my personal issue kind of with the internet in some ways is that for all the good that it can do is that sometimes you do have this mentality that is that bandwagon mentality, and you can latch on to something unknowing of the greater context. And so that's one of the things that as a content creator, like I'll make videos that are not generally like the idea, the group thought. Mm-hmm. But I don't try to, I think it's all about that nuance of trying not to disrespect the group thought, but at the same time say like, okay, let's look at this and then let's look at both sides of this and have a conversation around it, which can be frustrating. So that's why games are a really easy and simple medium to sometimes, like outside when politics comes in and comes poking their head in. So do you have any other thoughts on this? Because like I said at the intro, I don't want to spend the entire podcast on this. But I felt like it was important to address. Do you have any thoughts on this subject before we talk about fun things?
For fun, well, like I mean, it's very true what you guys said about Blizzard and WoW. Really, for the great thing, it's been a very up and down battle for quite a long time, and it's funny because they seem to just take one step forward and then all of a sudden come tumbling back. Like WoW Classic, quite successful for them for about a month, and then all hell goes loose. So it's like it's a really tough thing to watch for someone, like for people who have, I'm sure, played WoW a lot longer than me, who've been fans of Blizzard. It's probably really hard seeing a company that you had a lot of faith in, a lot of of your childhood memories with. It's just probably hard to see that, right? So
it is. I think we like to put like a personhood on a company. Like there are people who run the company, and we want a company we want to believe in. I think essentially what this is ultimately is, well, it's bigger than Blizzard. They just kind of the one who tripped the landmine and tripped all of them. But ultimately, I look at it, I go, it's been a year of frustration, and this is just something else to be mad about. And it feels like gamers haven't had the chance to catch their wind. And every time it kind of dies down, Blizzard has put its foot in its mouth one way or another. And it's the greater context is that, is it really Blizzard anymore? Is because people say, call it Activision Blizzard. Don't separate them mentally. They are one company, and it's like that's a whole argument. Chris, do you have a thought on that? Because I know you've got a rooted history with with Blizzard.
Activision Blizzard as a combination is a marriage. That is not, they're not roommates, they're not friends, they're not this whole idea that they're going to just pull a Bungie and just be off on their own. That is not how this works. At this point, they are sharing the same dresser, they have commingled finances, they are eating out of the same box of cereal. There isn't any separating it anymore. They are 100% cross. The leadership is cross. They are every bit as much in, so there is no this is Activision's fault, this is Blizzard's fault. And if there was any chance, any semblance of, when I hang out with Brian, he still says some things that's the Brian before he met Julie, that went out the window when Mike stepped down. Mike was around for 28 years, and people can say Mike was pushed out, and maybe he was, but maybe he wasn't. But at the end of the day, if he was pushed out, he would have had to eventually retire anyway. So like, it's a bummer that it happened when it did, but we have to admit, like, he wasn't going to be in charge for 50 years, 60 years, 100 years.
Nor like he probably want that.
At some point, I think he wants to focus on other things and move to a different chapter in his life. And unfortunately, that means that we've had to see what Blizzard looks like without him. And that's a tough transition, especially with some of the choices that have been made in his absence.
So I think we could put a pin in that, which would be fun, because let's talk about some fun games. I'm going to start, obviously, with Final Fantasy XIV, because Alex in the chat's actually saying they haven't seen any 14 videos in a while. What is everybody just waiting on? An update. And so we know 5.1 coming out here in a few weeks. We don't have a hard date on it, but we consider maybe the 22nd or the 29th. I have had a lot of people, and I kind of am like, man, the 29th would actually be pretty great, because I'm still trying to get finished with Destiny. I'm still trying to get finished with these other games. That'd be great for me, but the 22nd would be great because I can't wait to see what's going on with the story. So like for Final Fantasy, for like this patch, like how far are you in the game currently? You're new. People are kind of teasing you because you haven't hit level cap. What level are you? What's your progress? So that way I don't just completely ruin the story for you. By the way, it was the Moogles the whole time. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I'm like the slowest leveler ever. And it's become worse even because I, for a long time, was saying I'm just going to like stick to the Bard and just continue through the main scenario quest and go all the way to the end.
That's what we recommend.
Yeah, I know. And then I recently tried out the Arcanist. And I've kind of been very focused on leveling the Arcanist, and now I've become a summoner, and people are like, oh, you're going through this again. Why don't you get to the higher level so you can get to the expansion content? Because that's where things really, are quite interesting, which I'm super excited about as well. It's just because I play the game with the mentality that you should explore every aspect of it and all the features and stuff like that. And I'm like, why am I blocking myself from trying different jobs and switching jobs on the same character? Because that's one of the most unique aspects of this MMO. I shouldn't be limiting myself from that, even if I want to really push for the story, for the end game and stuff like that. So I did take a little break and went to the Arcanist, and they're now, I think my Arcanist, or my Summoner rather, is level 35.
Okay. You're in the valley right now, in which that the most people burn out of 14 from the 35 to 49, or the patch 2.1 or patch 2.1 to 2.55. I do want to say, like, one of the things that Chris and I, from a content perspective, that I'm working on is a couple of things. I'm working on really long, in-depth reviews, and I think one of the things that I would like to do, especially as it relates to 14, as someone who played from beta to 1.0 to 2.0 and beyond, like, at the time, 2.0 was awesome. Like, the 2.1 to 2.55 was content that was great. Oh, you mean you've given me 15 quests and every 3 months? Okay, like, I'll go do that, because that was exciting. We didn't know what was going to go happen, but ultimately, years later, who would have thought that the game could continue, because we didn't, like, nobody knew what was the plan. And now it's like, okay, it wasn't 15 quests every 3 months. It's like, here's 150 quests. Like, now new people are hitting this wall, and they're like, wait, like, I want to get to the, I want to get to the next chapter, but now I have to do a lot more work. So 5.3 is going to be addressing that. But yeah, you need to get as best as you can out of the 35 to 49 grind and get to the at least 50, because that will actually propel you forward. And not that you can't go and level other jobs, but ultimately, if you stay in that zone forever, I think it becomes harder and harder to escape. It's like the more jobs that you have in the 30s and nothing in the 50s, it's like you've increased this black hole that makes it harder to escape that orbit. And then all of a sudden, the people that complain to us, they're like, this game sucks. Like, I've gotten 8 jobs to 45. Yeah, it probably does suck. Like, there's a lot that you're not seeing, and you're seeing the same stuff. You're like, what is there? Is there anything more than this? Yes.
So yeah, my hope is to use both the Bard and the Summoner and kind of alternate between them and do the main scenario quests and kind of use the different jobs to bring some excitement in, because like the story is exciting, but you do get to a point where you're like, okay, another quest, and you're like, I kind of wish I could do a duty or something like that just to break it up. And I do come from a lot of other MMOs where, like, wow, you can just stay in like the dungeon finder and like that's all you can do and you're just fine. Like, it's a very different mentality. And just, you have to be in the right headspace to take your time with the story, because the other issue is if you're just trying to get through the story, you then start skipping parts and dialogue, and then it becomes a whole lot worse than it was going to be.
Right.
So it is better to take your time, care about the story, but still focus on it. It's a juggling act, really. But it's enjoyable.
What level is your Summoner?
He just hit 35. And I've really just been working on him for like the last week and a bit. I was like, I'm going to dive into another job. And I leveled that a lot quicker than I did the Bard. So hopefully
you will see. Like, you get the armory bonus. And so
I definitely felt that. Yeah.
And then you get, like, there's other ways that you can kind of just help. We've put together guides, and I'm waiting for the New Game Plus to see if we need to update our alternate job leveling guides, because it's kind of gray. So we know, like, for 5.1, if anybody hasn't been keeping up with it, New Game Plus, the community, like the Rebuilding Vishgard, which is community crafting and gathering, server-wide content, and we'll see that here on the 18th. We know we get new dungeon. We know we get the ultimate fight. We know we get a new raid with the Nier Automata, raid series, and that's going to kick that off. So it feels like a meaty.
It is. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, there are some things we're not getting. So you will not be getting New Game Plus for ARR, and that's because we're at 5.3, we're getting the ARR squish, whatever that ends up looking like. So it doesn't make sense to release New Game Plus and then change it. So that'll, of course, wait to come sometime then or later. Then with all the new housing additions, they're not adding the Ishgard housing yet. So for those of you that have been waiting for that, since they have definitely hinted that that's a thing coming, that will not be yet. So definitely kind of keep in mind, this is a huge patch, but there's still more saved for 5.2, 5.3, and so on.
Yeah, so the thing I'm looking for, because as a former Summoner main who is still leveling up my jobs, but just really blown away by Machinist and disappointed by Summoner. They're making Summoner adjustments come 5.1. So I'm like, I'm actively like, what is this? So one of the cool things, so for like you as a new player, for anybody who's watching who hasn't really experienced something that's about to drop, is that the ultimate fights are fights that are designed with streaming in mind. One of the things that 14 continues to do, because it's so narrative and story driven, you have ebbs and flows with any kind of thing, but there becomes times of just big droughts that Yoshi P, the game's director, says, go take a break. But they have a specific content that they release called Ultimate, which is just the top of the top. They never make it easier, and you're going to end up seeing Final Fantasy XIV like on the top on Twitch when that drops, because it is also the most entertaining content to watch, because it's just something like people are like, you're going to do Ultimate? And I go, not if I keep having kids. Like at some point, like if me and my wife stop having children, like maybe there's a future there, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
You'll watch somebody clear a fight, and you'll watch somebody try a fight, and they'll be trying it for a whole day only to realize that they've been doing a mechanic wrong. And then they have to like totally start back. It's just punishing content. So it really gives a chance for the people who have the mechanical skill and the knowledge combined and the time to really stretch their legs and show how good at this game somebody can be, because this game has so much single player to it. So it has so much forgiveness within the combat system. And you see that in the Duty Finder when you get in there and there's like just a clear skill gap between people in your party. And so the ultimate fights are really a neat time to see what the top level players look like, because there is no need to be that good in everyday dungeons.
So if you don't know, like the ultimate probably will drop 1 or 2 weeks after after the patch. They'll kind of stagger that. So that should be sometime in early November, so I'm excited about it. So I got my first main question, though, is that what actually got you started playing Final Fantasy XIV? You said you played other games. Like the MMO thing I get. WoW. Guild Wars 2, which I think is a phenomenal game, and if it could run if I can natively do the control, I've done hacks on it, and it just doesn't. It's just like it's. Anyway, what specifically introduced you to the game? B has kept you coming back.
So I've known about Final Fantasy XIV for a long time. It's always been that sort of like that other subscription MMO that I could play. And it was the sub fee, like it's an investment you have to make in it. You have to be like, yeah, I want to play this and actually go hard at it for a little bit. Like the free trial, actually having done that, is really, really good. I was actually surprised by how good that was comparing it to WoW's free trial. Just your ability to go through so many different jobs. Like there's a ton of content that I could almost have still been on the free trial up to the point that I've been at. Like there's a few things that I've done to pass it now, but like even like it's been quite a few months now. I could have still just been playing the free trial and dived into other jobs, which you're saying isn't great for new players to do, but it is cool to see the world that way. One of the biggest reasons I didn't get into it sooner is I've never ever played Final Fantasy anything. And that's a huge amount of lore. It's a whole world that if you don't know anything, it feels like you're not going to appreciate some aspects of the game as much, maybe. And having gone into it now, like I have really enjoyed it. I do find myself sometimes reading up about other Final Fantasy like lore and stuff like that to further my enjoyment. So there is a bit that you need to invest in terms of learning about the world and stuff like that. For instance, watching the documentaries on the original release of the game and just what the game went through. Like I had no idea. And that's made my appreciation for the developers, for what the game is now, so much more. And just all those kind of things have really added to my enjoyment. In terms of continuing the play, I really enjoy all the different features I've come across. Like I try to highlight a new feature every so often. Most recently was the Palace of the Dead, because my comment section's always like, you have to do this, you have to do this. And then I'll like go on for like a month without doing it, and they'll just call me out on it. And I'm like, yeah, I'll try it today. And there's so many features in this game that are different that I've never seen in any other MMO. They're really trying to do different ways of leveling, different ways of exploring the game. And it's really fun to see. So things like that have kept me engaged for sure.
That's fantastic. So what you said you've actually been doing the YouTube thing for a while. What actually got you started creating content?
That's a really good question. What did I no, that's all good. I started
getting better at this
YouTube,
podcasting thing.
like I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. And I originally started making stop motion videos on a whiteboard and didn't have many people watching them. And I was like, I'm also just doing this just to make videos. I was like, why don't I make content of what I do as a, like in my spare time anyways, which is gaming. So I was like, all right, let's put those together. The game I was playing at the time was Guild Wars 2. And I was kind of into making like gold in that game and stuff like that, like trying to get money to make legendaries. Like that's the big part of what you do in that game. So I made videos on gold guides and that kind of thing, which is very different than what I do now exploring new games, because I just don't have the knowledge to really say this is how you should make gil or whatever, or whatever it is in another game, right?
Yeah.
So
go ahead. Like I always.
No, it's all good.
All right, phones.
But yeah, so I started getting a few viewers that way, and then I continued with Guild Wars 2, and then naturally I kind of drifted to a different MMO, and I just kind of had to start making new content with kind of a different audience, but there were people that kind of followed from game to game to game. The most difficult part of being a content creator, I think, is if you want to play something, but your audience expects you to play something else, is finding a way to bridge that, right? Because you don't like want to make videos about something that you're not truly invested in at the time. You want to share what you are truly invested in. And you know that some people aren't going to love it. I've had that experience a few times going from game to game to game. Even going to Final Fantasy XIV, there was probably some viewers that are like, hey, I miss your old content or whatever. And it's like, I love all these games still, and I still play them and try to put out a few videos once in a while. But I have to stay true to whatever I'm enjoying at the moment, right?
Right. I think every content creator has that same kind of challenge. We're talking about to Larry's hour about that. Like last year, it's like, he's like, oh, I want to do X, and it's like, I was like, I'll do it, and he's like, yeah, people weren't really gonna like it. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, that sucks. And so some people will, some people won't. We always kind of say, because like the complaint we'll get, it's like the same kind of thing. Like, oh, why? Like, I don't like it when you talk about Destiny, or I don't like it when you talk about WoW. Like, okay, well, don't watch those videos, and YouTube's not going to recommend it to you if you don't watch those enough, and they'll recommend the videos that you do watch. And so engage with the content that you want to make, because this is like, on demand, a la carte, right? It's like. And if you want to watch the content, all the content, that's even better. But it's like, it's I think it's always going to be a struggle. I think even PewDiePie struggles with that. Like, he's probably the best example of somebody who's been able to shift types of content the most effectively. But that also does help when you have, I think, over 1 million subscribers now. But like, even as he was growing with that,
he's never slowed down though, and that's impressive.
Yeah.
He's never taken those breaks. Like, he just keeps
going.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's actually another huge part of this. Since I've started Final Fantasy XIV, I've released at least a video a week, oftentimes 2 videos a week. And that is tremendously more content than I've put out prior to that. I think I used to hit maybe a video a month. And even in that 6-year period of doing YouTube, there's been times where I've taken multiple months off. Where I just didn't feel like making videos, and like I wasn't inspired to really do anything, right? So the ability to continue making videos, I try to put a video out every Saturday morning at 9, and like I've actually used YouTube's like actual schedule feature to like release it at a specific time now. I know my schedule. I'm like, at least my audience can count on this one video. If I get more out, that's great. and it's really been quite helpful. It's been something to really pay attention to if I do like travel or I'm away for a bit. I'm like, I need to actually make some videos in advance, prepare for this. So I've been trying to take things a little bit more seriously, and I think it has paid off significantly. Just with the amount of like Final Fantasy people I've had coming in, but there's been a lot more people from other games as well that have come in and said, hey, I like your content, please put this out regularly as well. And it's like, I'll try. But it's been good. It's been real fun.
That's good. That the fun and is a key driver. Like I really enjoy this, and I think Chris and I, we've said it multiple times. Like even if like the ads weren't paying and people weren't subscribing, we'd still make content. We just make significantly less of it. So it's like the content that is made, like and the support that we get is the reason why we have this podcast. Like we had a thing where like, well, like we really want to do a podcast, and how can we make that work, because it's a lot of work, and it was never like the most viewed thing up until like prior to Shadowbringers. Like that's when I was like, wow, I haven't seen like these kind of numbers on the podcast ever from just a views and a watch time. So but I was like, good, people are responding to the content itself, and so we're gonna definitely keep doing that. So yeah, it's definitely gonna be a balance. Now you've been playing I'm probably gonna butcher it, ArcheAge Unchained. Like that's a kind of a release. Like you actually got invited. That's always, I guess, kind of fun and flattering, and it feels like, oh man, like somebody's actually saying, come play my game. I watched your video on it. I thought you did a really good job talking about it as an MMORPG and as a avid player of that. But you did say something in that video that I thought was really interesting, and forgive me for hopefully not putting you on the spot. You had access to the outline. Why do you think MMO players are cynical?
Well, we always view the MMO market as a dying market. That's really made us all very cynical, I think, and a lot of games have proven that to be untrue as of late. Like Shadowbringers is a modern MMO release that's done extremely well. WoW Classic has shown that the old school classic servers have a place in this world, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of games actually that I'd love to see a classic server for that I would be playing a tremendous amount of.
I want to now ask you to list those games.
Well, the first MMO I played, and it's not absolutely at all for everyone, but was MapleStory. That was a big part of my life for like 4 years. I played just that game. It was the first like computer game I'd ever seen. And I just didn't know that there was so many other games I could be playing. And, since then I've played other things, but the nostalgia factor, like the thing people are reliving through WoW Classic. I never played Vanilla. I never played Burning Crusade. I'm like, I get what you guys would be feeling, because if I had this for my first MMO, I would be like streaming that every day, all day. So that's one of the games. Obviously, I'd love to see something done with WildStar. I think it was a great game that had a lot of issues, but did a tremendous amount of things right if people were willing to, and people weren't, which is fair, give it the time to get through that kind of growing stage. Mm-hmm. But I would love to see something done with that. I know that it probably won't ever happen, and I guess you just have to be kind of excited if it does when they happen, and not just spending your days hoping. Mm-hmm. I think the other reason, like MMO players love MMOs on computers. They hate a lot of like there's a lot of push towards mobile MMOs now, that even if it was a perfect mobile game, I think people would just hate because it's on a phone. Like there's a lot of things that suck about current mobile MMOs, like autoplay, like microtransactions, like I don't even know. Like there's a lot of things that suck. Don't get me wrong. A lot of the games are terrible. The one exception to that is old school RuneScape seems to be doing pretty okay on the phone. And I actually enjoyed it more on a phone than I ever did on a computer, because I felt its graphics, its way of maneuvering around the world was actually more set up for a touchscreen device. And I'm probably still in the minority for enjoying it more that way. But we tend to hate other game genres a lot. Like if you ever mention Fortnite or a battle royale in a MMO.
Sorry, we have to mute you now. No.
Oh yeah, well exactly. People are gonna like freak out. Like that's the whole Ashes of Creation thing that I've been so sort of following, just like I'm not even that invested, but people are really upset about them testing their combat in a battle royale kind of situation. And they're like, are you guys still making an MMO? What's going on? Like it's really hard to bridge that those two different types of games, and people just seem to be very one or the other, which I'm someone who loves just playing whatever I love playing and not over analyzing it or anything like that. But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, Chris, I'll toss it to you for a quick sec, because I think Battle Royale was solved by Guild Wars 2 with the World versus World, but I'll come back to that.
I think the big problem with the attitudes surrounding MMOs in general is a lot of it comes down to expectation. There's a feature creep. So a shooter is a shooter is a shooter is a shooter. A racing game is a racing game is a racing game. But when you have an MMO, you start to have these really broad sense. So it's like, okay, we're going to tell like the best story. Okay, cool. And then we're going to have the best bosses. Awesome. Which means we'll have to have the best loot system. Cool. Which means people are going to want to take it to PvP. Okay. And then we're going to want to have a cosmetic system. Yeah. And then that means probably mounts and minions and a crafting system.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it just keeps, next thing you know, you've got card games in there, and you've got little like racing games inside these games, and you've got seasonal events, and and then now you are having striations within it. So it's like, oh, I'm here for this and this and this, but I'm not at the same skill level as somebody else. So then you've got different raid tiers, and next thing you know, you have this game that has 100 hours of content in each of 1,000 buckets. Yeah. And so developing them there is really expensive, and they're trying to split their resources. And you're like, but I only like these 3 buckets. So when that patch comes out and it doesn't touch my 3, it's garbage. And so I think a lot of that frustration, and all we hear is the people complaining, because the people that aren't complaining, these games are time sinks. So the people who are happy aren't on Reddit. Right. They're playing. Like one of the reasons that Shadowbringer streams really struggled out of the gate was the story was so good and people don't want spoilers. So ironically, the game was too good to be on the top of Twitch because nobody wanted spoilers. So they were all like, well, when I'm not playing, I don't want to see anybody else play because I really want to know what happens next in my own time. And so it ironically, like, the story was so good it, I think, damaged the launch. And so MMOs, I think that cynical is just something that rises to the top by the players who aren't having their specific set of needs met. That's kind of my thought.
And it's a huge it's a huge balancing act, because it is a game that essentially tries to address a wide variety of different audiences. And I think essentially for the cynicism has grown mostly due to how these games are then monetized, how these games are engaged with, because the MMO of today and our ability to play them today, we're now competing against 1,000 other games of like really great quality. Back in the day, it's like, oh, I have to wait how many years before I can play another Final Fantasy game? Oh, I'm living in Final Fantasy XI. This is great. I'm making my own adventure. Me and my friends are together and we're participating in it. And there isn't like, oh, why aren't you going and playing this like awesome other game? It's like, well, that game doesn't technically exist right now, and I'll look forward to it when it comes out, and then I'll go play it. So it's like there is a bigger level of competition. I honestly believe that MMOs are about to undergo a huge revolution, and you've kind of hit at it. Like mobile has been really prevalent in China, in like India, in Japan. And essentially the phone, for as powerful as it is and as many times I can make my face look different and things like that with those apps, it is also limiting. But what we are seeing, and this is kind of like one of the things that we're very pro on, is the cloud gaming revolution that in North America, everybody I talk to about it, like, I don't know. When you go hands-on with it, you're going to know. You're going to be like, seriously? Like, it's that good? And it's only going to get better? And you mean I'm going to have a high-end PC gaming experience from my phone or from like my Switch or from like any of my devices, and all of a sudden okay, and so but then questions of ownership come up. So beyond like the issues that it is going to face, MMOs have always been online, have always required that like internet connection and more. They like just take Final Fantasy XI mobile. We haven't heard anything about it, not saying that it is going to be what it is, but thinking on it, like, why make multiple clients anymore? Why have the concept we hear it with Final Fantasy PS3 limitations? Now we hear PS4 limitations. Ultimately, MMOs can become on console, on PC, on your phone, and you're not going to have to sacrifice the experience for the device anymore. You literally are just the device. It's just the window into the game. And outside of all the issues that people rightfully have with cloud gaming, MMOs are poised to be able to take advantage of that, and developers will benefit from both the cost and a delivery mechanism, because they don't have to sit here and like, okay, well, we can't build this feature because the PlayStation 4 won't support it. Okay, well, what do we do? Like, how do we make that work? Well, you know what? If the system doesn't support it, you're actually in charge of that, and you can upgrade that with the expansion, or you can do that, etc. And it makes a natural already subscription-based MMO like Final Fantasy XIV even more natural in its state. However, again, North America, I think, still 10 years. This is going to be something more revolutionary from a technological perspective in developing countries that are smaller and don't have to cover as much land masses as currently in North America.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So, with all that said, as we've started to shift from the culture of games to now talking about more of the hardware of games, let's assume for a moment, with all the games you've played over the years, that you have an unlimited budget. So you're going into 14 and you're going through your leveling process. What feature would you take from any other game you've ever played and drop it into 14 right now?
That's a hard question, and I saw that one on the outline, and I was like, "Oh boy, what am I going to say?" It's difficult for two reasons. Number one, I haven't played all the features in the game. Like, I haven't gotten 10 games, so I can't accurately say what exactly is in the game or not, and like how good it is. So there's that aspect of things. The other side of it is if I want to bring something and then people don't like, but we'll see. So from what I've played already, the PvP in Final Fantasy XIV, and I think a lot of people are kind of like that, it's not the best out there, in my opinion. And I think that's kind of like what a lot of people say about it as well. I don't know what I would bring in to change it. And I think that's something that we kind of touched on in the last discussion about other games. Like, why would you play an MMO for PvP if you could play a specific just PvP game that's going to do it a lot better, right? It's a really hard thing to have a great PvP system in a game that does all these other systems as well. When they have to balance for different things, when they have to, if they're not doing that, they're splitting skills, which makes so much more work that they have to analyze and kind of work on. I would love... But I'd love a game where there is a PvP scene with a bit, something to it. And it's hard to say what I actually enjoy, what MMO was my favorite PvP, because there's issues with each of them. For instance, I really enjoyed arenas in WildStar because their combat system was true action combat that felt really, really good in PvP encounters with very few people. But when you had a battleground with that kind of action combat, you saw telegraphs everywhere and you actually had no idea what was going on. Right. So I was like, oh, maybe that doesn't work as well. And then you have games like Guild Wars 2 that have a variety of different, PvP-ish things. Like they have the World v. World, they have the Conquest, they had their other type that they tried to release in Heart of Thorns that we won't talk about because it's kind of been discontinued. But I love the combat in that. I wish there was more modes for PvP. So I would love something PvP related that's just, I don't know, some sort of focus on improving the PvP in Final Fantasy XIV. And I say that as someone who hasn't played even through all the different modes. So I apologize if that's fine. A rough comment to make.
I think you're 100% PvP would be hugely beneficial to the 14 community, especially in downtimes from PvE. Developers can't make enough PvE content to satisfy our appetites. Like, we're getting one dungeon in 5.1. If they made 10 dungeons, it wouldn't be enough. Like, we would play those dungeons and eventually we're like, and where's more? Like, I'm hungry for more PvE content. PvP is I think a really good thing. And it doesn't mean everybody has to get involved with it. I think jumping off your idea of PvP, like I've really appreciated what Guild Wars 2 has done, but even to the point where when I look at like Call of Duty, when I look at like even shooter games as a PvP, stats, like I want to know stats. I want not just at the end of the match, like what's my PvP career? Can I shoot for different things? Is there a weekly different kind of thing? Like there is so much that like all like just even like taking other games, like I really am a huge fan of Destiny, and that is my PvP game. I go from match to match to match. I get my little quests, my little bounties, and I'm constantly making like all these different progress, and I've got stats, and I can go see how many total kills I've got, how many, etc. Like, and I think essentially that would be something like would be awesome to have in the game to foster a community around that. Not that it has to be for everybody and everybody has to take part in it, but to reward those who do. And they've gotten the concept of seasons, but it would be really cool to see more investment in that, more meat to that, having the seasonal concept not just be for one mode, but overall. Like, what did you do this season in PvP? 100%. Chris?
So to take that one step further, see if I can restrict myself keeping it in that line of thought.
Unlimited budget, though.
I would take that same stats and lay it over the whole game in a complex like achievement system, stats, all of it. Because like right now at the end of a PvP match, you do get a form of stats. Why do I not get that same screen at the end of a dungeon? Now, for everybody that plays PvP and immediately clicks out of it, it would be the same option. You don't have to engage with it. But it'd be really great if it then took what Brian said and said, hey, here's where you performed against your previous runs as a black mage. Here's what the top black mages are doing at scaled for your eye level. You know, and here's your skill breakdowns. Like you'll notice the top black mage has 7.5% of their damage coming from thunder. You have 2%. That starts to give you clues on like, okay, well then that's what I'm missing in my rotation is I'm letting my thunder fall off, and that's what I need to be doing better at. And then taking that all the way through the achievement system, because right now the achievement system in 14 compared to other MMOs feels very flat. It's very kill 10 of these things. Oh, you killed 10? Kill 100. Oh, you killed 100? Kill 1,000. And like there's no depth there. There's no complexity. And we have a handful of interesting achievements. Go find this fate, go do this thing, but I want a system so large that like you don't feel like, oh, I'm going to try to complete them all. It's just, hey, I'm going to go try to just complete this, and you can go lock things behind it. It's something I think WoW does very well. You know, with all the issues that I have in BFA, one of the reasons that I was able to play, so I farmed up my gold so I could play WoW Classic on gold instead of subscription, because I told you guys like I was frustrated with Blizzard, and it's like, well, I want them to succeed, so I want them to have my subscription, but I'm frustrated with them as an individual, so I don't want them to have my money. So I kind of rationalized it to myself as, okay, if I spend gold on my subscription, then it's someone else supporting them, so they're getting the support I want them to get, but not from my wallet. And it's rationalizing 100%, but either way. And so as I was farming those things up, I wasn't doing it in BFA content, because BFA content doesn't engage me. It's not something I personally enjoy. I was going back and I was farming old content. And while I was at it, I was grabbing all these old achievements and stuff that I was missing from before. So I was going through and I was like, wow, back in Lich King, I had all but these 2 things for this meta. Let me just go knock those 2 out. And so that was really neat. And I would love to see kind of 14 use that, because we have so much content. And we end up kind of spending all our time in the first right now. And the first is great.
Yeah, that's where I want to be.
Give me reasons to go back to the source.
Yeah, that actually made me think of 2. So number 1 that you mentioned, the idea of using gold to buy subscription time. I love that in WoW. That's one of the biggest things that they've done to improve their game. And like in my eyes, the last little while since I played back when I was a kid. I would like that in Final Fantasy XIV as well. I like that it's just an option, right? You can do it the normal way you're doing it right now, or you can do it the other way.
Yeah. Well, and the thing
it's
is,
controversial.
It's controversial, but the thing is, it's already still like people are buying gold.
Yeah, that's the messy part, right?
So people are like, no, that's going to ruin the economy. People are already doing it. It's just taking out the botters and the scammers and whatnot.
WoW doesn't just sell gold from elsewhere. That gold comes from players.
Yes.
Yeah, that's usually where the confusion comes in.
So they think they're just printing money, so it's going to lead to this rampant inflation, but that's not. They're just facilitating the trade between people who want subscription time and people who want gold, and then they're pocketing a little bit of money along the way, which is what the gold sellers are doing.
The issue from like that side of things is then it does become easier to buy power, right? Like in World of Warcraft, if you spent real world money, you can't get the very top tier,
right?
But you can get pretty close with some BOEs if you're willing to put down any amount of money into the game.
Yeah, they're learning from it. So I know it wasn't this world first race. I think it was the one before this, maybe the one before that. One of the top guilds basically borrowed money from a bunch of other guilds, like sister guilds, and they went to multiple servers and bought up, put new characters into guilds, transferred those, paid for transfers to transfer those over, because they found this crafting system that based this kind of accidental hack within the crafting system that it was good for them. And basically, long story short, what they ended up doing is they needed to craft like thousands and thousands of these. And so they had to source from they don't have a world visit system. So they had to source from multiple servers, and they spent all kinds of money. But in general, money in WoW, it doesn't buy you, like you said, it doesn't buy you that top tier loot. It doesn't buy you. There's enough forms of like bind on pickup and stuff in the game to stop that from happening. But speaking of power, what feature would you take from 14 from your experience so far? I think I already know yours. And then you would carry it back with you as you go either back into MMOs you played before, or kind of have it in your back pocket next time you try a new MMO.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'm saying the one you're thinking of then, but definitely like the ability to switch to different classes on the same character is by far the most unique aspect of playing this game, and one of the nicest things to bring, I think, to bring back to any game. I really do enjoy the ability because it makes it feel like you can try different classes. Like you're not giving up as much to make that dive into a different class or job, rather. I guess I still say one or the other. It depends, I guess.
So I was calling the Destiny classes jobs too. So it's like Chris will be like, "It's your class," and somebody's like, "It's called a job." It's like it's the root.
I made a thumbnail like that the other day intentionally.
But I think that would be such.
I think
such a good thing to have.
Playing WoW?
Yeah, exactly.
What job should you play in WoW? It's super confusing because and then Guild Wars 2, I think they're actually like originally were called professions or something like that, and then I was like, then what do we call the trade skills in the game? Like it's weird when games like there's a standard thing that people in the MMO world tend to call things, and it's hard when people name it something just to be different. Like obviously Final Fantasy XIV has this rooted like way back in their lore of other games, so that's fair. I accept that. I'm coming to your guys' culture and changing the way I'm speaking, or trying to shift it to be more Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah,
but
to speak essentially the common language, because like
exactly
Final Fantasy players don't call it a tune; it's a character.
Yeah,
now they're all like used to represent something very similar, but it's still that and I get it. Like when people say tune, I'm like, this isn't fun. This isn't WoW.
Well, there's also something to be said for. I wonder if there's a little bit of a fear of if you name everything in the common language, does Blizzard or Wizard or the Coast
do they own it?
Come back to you and say you can't do that, because those two companies both have a history of saying like you don't get to just come in and rip off of my hard work.
No, it's very true. It's a complex situation. Well, but the moral of the story is I would bring that feature to different games. I think it's a really fun feature. The one limitation is I do like the idea of making a new character, which I still have the option to. I just don't see why I would really, given the situation.
Right.
I also understand that you can change like the appearance of your character based on the different job, and I haven't gotten into that side of things, and that might make me more even excited about this feature and being able to bring it back. So but I do love it.
Chris, how about you?
The crafting and gathering system depth. I think some games also have there are other games that do a really good job of making like use of that. Like I think like ESO, for example, I've always really enjoyed the Elder Scrolls like style of leveling, and then the ability to kind of just go out and gather, and you're like, oh, twinkling bush, but like your brother specifically is somebody who like we'll be playing for 2 hours on a headset in different parts of the world, and we'd be playing ESO at the same time, and I'd be like, dude, I leveled twice, and he's like, oh, I've just been gathering plants. Like he's done nothing, has not killed anything for 2 hours. And so when you imagine another game's ability to take advantage of the depth of like all the different crafting, just the thought of making them their own class that you swap onto has really opened them up to where they have their own form of mana, they have their own gear sets, they have it's just allowed them to have much more of an identity than games where that is kind of a sub-profession underneath your battle class.
Right.
Right.
I think anybody who's ever seen any video that I've ever made would know controller support in any and all of these other MMOs. Brian, it's less efficient. Well, is it more efficient than me not playing the game? That's the efficiency that I'm looking at. I don't need to be the best. Keyboard and mouse is so much better. Good for you. I'm happy that you have that as an option. You know what? I have it as an option.
So good.
I can play if I choose, but I'm going to choose this. Like, I'm going to play with a controller, and I'm going to enjoy it. And that's just going to be about how it goes. And so that would be absolutely number one for me. Now, we are coming up on our hour. We always try to keep these shows in that length of time. So we have more questions and more, but we're going to have to keep up with you. We want to get more information. So hopefully when you do get through the story, I'd love to have you back on to talk more about it. But Tiny Blue, do you have any final thoughts? Any kind of ideas that you want to share? Is there anything you're working on for your channel that you want people to be aware of? Tell people where they can find you.
Well, you can find me at TinyBlueGames on YouTube. That is the most reliable way to find me. I do have a Facebook page and Instagram page. I very rarely post to them as much as I should probably, and a Twitter account. So look at that. And
you also have a blog.
The blog, yes. And that one does get a bit more updates depending on, I did one for the ArcheAge. I did a blog post for that. So that one does happen a bit more. But YouTube, if you want to reach out to me, comments or whatever, that's the way to do it. I do try and reply to as many comments as I can. It's become hard. I used to reply to every single comment, and I did that for as long as I could. And then recently, just with the influx of Final Fantasy people and the comments, and they've been so great for leaving those comments and viewing the videos, it's been hard to do every single one. So I start doing kind of the top 20 or something for a video or something like that. Because at least then the group of people kind of thought this was a good question to ask. But that is the best way to reach out. And if you do reach out in multiple videos, I then start to see your little picture and your questions. And I'm like, oh, I should reply to you because you've made the effort. And that's the best way to reach out. But I do plan to just kind of continue my way to max level. I have no time estimate on what that will take, but I feel like
October 22nd. Heard her here first.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stop doing everything and just focus.
Get this man a Red Bull and let's do this thing.
No, I'm a casual player, so you'll probably still just see me do updates and complain about how slow I'm going through the game. But that's
level
okay.
Cap goes up every 2 years.
So
if you
there
don't
you go.
get to level cap before then, it will move on you.
I should be able to do that. That's a promise I'll make here on this podcast. I should be able to do that. Good.
Because we'd love to have you back before the next expansion to talk more about Final Fantasy and what else you're playing. Chris, where can people find us? What are you working on?
Well, I'm just gearing up to go to BlizzCon, and I've been traveling and stuff. I've got a Warrior Guide I'm working on. I was playing some WoW Classic. Now I have to decide, are there... This is the issue I have with Destiny. It's such a good game. The question is what happens around it. Now I have that same issue with WoW Classic. I love WoW Classic. Now I have to question, do all the things around it change whether or not I want to put out videos on it? And so I'm working on all that. I'm glad it's the 22nd. You said you wanted the 29th. I don't know if you think about the dates. We're leaving.
Gone.
Yeah, we're gone.
Yeah.
So the 22nd at least gives me some time to, play the new stuff at least once, and then the ultimate fights will come basically right when we get back. Mm-hmm. So we'll be looking at ultimates the day after we get back.
That's gonna be nuts. So and then for me, I'm working on Red Mage, and I'm working on Destiny guides, and people are really responding to the Destiny guide stuff, which is really helpful because New Light is bringing a lot of players back to the game. And I came back this summer after they left Activision, and I think there was a sigh of relief with all the Blizzard stuff that's been happening, where I was like, well, thank God that Bungie's not tied up in with this, but still, I'm like, okay, we're going to see ultimately how that plays out. So I'm enjoying that, and I'm just happy that Dragon Quest is on Nintendo Switch. And if you haven't played a Dragon Quest game, or you want to just support me emotionally, buy Dragon Quest. Anyway, so like we said, links for all this will be in the description of this video, and also podcast links below, so you can check out Chris at TinyBlueGames. and give him some support. Say hi from us if you go, and if we're introducing you to him, go tell him hello for us as well. Last week, again, like we said, we had DM21 Gaming on Mixer. Next week, we have I'm really excited to welcome. My name is Bife. He's going to become another program. We're going to be talking Destiny lore, lore and stories. It's going to be, I think, a really exciting time for us. So we've got...
It's the Ethos of Destiny.
The Ethos of Destiny is coming on. He put out a 4-hour story summary
4 hours.
of the story of Destiny. And so somebody was
Take a break, like in the middle for food.
Like it's 2 movies and you need an intermission. So ultimately I think somebody was like, can you summarize this, Brian? And so I'm like, yeah, I've been following the story. So I'll see if I can't put like a 20-minute story summary. Don't have 4. If you got 4 hours, here's your popcorn. If you don't, maybe here's anyway. So I'll be working on some more Destiny and more Final Fantasy guides and stuff like that. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. Anyway, for Work to Game, my name's Brian.
My name's Chris.
I'm Chris too, but from TinyBlueGames.
Yeah, he did it. Thank you so much for watching this podcast. Hope you guys all have a fantastic week. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye.